special guest, Jeannie Pruitt, Joe Stampley.
Hee Haw ran for over 20 years and made America laugh every single week. But behind the cornfield jokes and banjo picking, the real lives of this cast were nothing like what you saw on screen. One member was murdered in his own home over cash stuffed in his overalls. Another lost her son and died alone across the country from everything she knew. One man's twin brother died 8 months after him, and people say it was grief that killed him. Some of these people are still alive in 2026. Others left behind stories so dark you won't believe they came from a comedy show. Roy Clark and Buck Owens stood side by side at the center of Hee Haw, but in almost every other way, they were complete opposites, and that contrast gave the show a strange kind of balance that audiences never forgot. Roy Clark was the warm and polished one, the smiling showman who seemed born to entertain. He was born on April 15, 1933, in Meherrin, Virginia, and from the start, music seemed to live in his hands. His first instrument was a cigar box ukulele, and by the time he was a teenager, he was already winning national banjo championships. Over the years, he became known not just as a great guitarist, but as a rare kind of musician who could seemingly play anything: guitar, banjo, mandolin, fiddle, and more. He could move through country, bluegrass, jazz, classical, and even Latin styles with ease. When Hee Haw premiered on June 15, 1969, Roy Clark was there, and he stayed there all the way to the final taping, becoming the steady heart of the show for its entire run. Off-camera, his life looked just as full. He stayed married to his wife Barbara for 61 years. He owned the Tulsa Drillers minor league baseball team. He flew his own business jet. In 1976, he performed 18 sold-out concerts in the Soviet Union and became the first country artist to do it. The CMA named him Entertainer of the Year in 1973, and in 2009, he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. When he died at age 85 on November 15, 2018, from complications of pneumonia at his home in Tulsa, people remembered not only his talent, but also the fact that his name had stayed clean. His fortune, estimated at around $1 million to $1.5 million, was modest compared to his co-host's wealth, but his reputation was worth far more. And when he looked back on Hee Haw, what mattered most to him was not fame or money. It was the way the show helped country music grow beyond its old boundaries and reach the world. Buck Owens came from a very different place, and maybe that is why he carried such a different edge. He was born Alvis Edgar Owens, Jr. on August 12, 1929, in Sherman, Texas, to a sharecropper family living through hard times. At age 3, he named himself Buck after the family's donkey, and the name stuck. His childhood was shaped by Depression-era poverty and the Dust Bowl migration. At one point, his family was headed west when their trailer hitch broke in Mesa, Arizona, and that accident changed everything because they simply stayed. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade, married at 16, and taught himself guitar using a radio his father had modified into an amplifier. By the mid-1960s, he had become one of the men who built the Bakersfield sound alongside Merle Haggard, and his success was enormous. He scored 21 #1 country hits, including 15 straight chart toppers between 1963 and 1967, a run that almost nobody in country music history has matched. His song Act Naturally became even more famous when the Beatles covered it with Ringo Starr singing lead. And in 1989, Owens and Starr recorded a duet version together at Abbey Road Studios. Yet for all that success, Buck Owens never made peace with Hee Haw. Roy Clark embraced the show. Buck often seemed trapped by it. He came to resent the silly image, the broad jokes, the cartoon donkey, and the feeling that all of it was eating away at his standing as a serious musician. He admitted later that he stayed because the money was too good to walk away from, especially for just a few weeks of work twice a year. That was the bitter trade he made. He kept cashing the checks while feeling that the show was costing him something deeper. In 1986, he finally left. If Roy and Buck gave Hee Haw its center, Minnie Pearl gave it one of its most unforgettable illusions, because the woman millions laughed with every week was never quite the woman they thought they were seeing. To audiences, Minnie Pearl was the flirty, man-hungry, small-town woman in a straw hat with a dangling $1.98 price tag. All charm and comic foolishness. But behind that character was Sarah Ophelia Colley Cannon, born on October 25, 1912, the youngest daughter of a prosperous Tennessee lumber merchant. She was educated, polished, and ambitious in a very different way than the character she created. She attended the elite Ward Belmont College, studied theater and dance, and at first dreamed of becoming a serious dramatic actress on Broadway. Even the famous price tag was not carefully planned. It was left on a hat by accident before her first performance in 1939, and when the audience laughed, she kept it there for the rest of her life. Her Grand Ole Opry debut came on November 30, 1940, and the response was instant. More than 300 letters poured in within a week. From there, she kept going for more than 50 years, building one of the longest and most beloved runs in country entertainment. In 1947, she married World War II fighter pilot Henry Cannon. Decades later, life hit her with something much harsher than stage comedy. In 1985, she was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent a double mastectomy. Instead of hiding from it, she became a spokeswoman for the Nashville Cancer Center that treated her. And she did it as Sarah Cannon, not Minnie Pearl. That mattered. The center was later renamed the Sarah Cannon Cancer Center and eventually expanded across more than 20 hospitals. Her final Opry appearance came in June 1991, and then, just 3 days later, tragedy struck again when a devastating stroke left her partially paralyzed. She spent the last years of her life in a nursing home where younger stars like Vince Gill and Amy Grant came to visit her often. On March 4, 1996, at age 83, she died from a second stroke. By then, the woman with the silly hat had already become something much larger. She had turned a comic mask into an American institution. And then there was Stringbean, whose story is so dark that it still feels like a tear in the history of the show. David Ackerman, born June 17, 1915, was known to the world as Stringbean, the lanky banjo player with the impossibly long shirt tucked into short pants, belted around his knees. He was one of the original cast members of Hee Haw, and he played the scarecrow in the cornfield scenes. After his death, that role was left standing as a silent memorial for the rest of the show's run. And once you know what happened, that detail hits hard. Stringbean had a habit that people noticed. He did not trust banks, and he often carried thick rolls of $100 bills in his overalls. That reputation followed him, and in the end, it got him killed. On the night of November 10, 1973, he performed at the Grand Ole Opry and then headed home with his wife Estelle to their cabin near Ridgetop, Tennessee. While they were still at the Ryman, two cousins, John and Marvin Brown, both 23, broke into the cabin looking for cash. They tore the place apart, found no money, stole some guns and a chainsaw, and then did something chilling. They turned on Stringbean's radio and listened to the live Opry broadcast so they could time the couple's return by hearing when Stringbean left the stage. When Stringbean and Estelle got home, she drove around the side to park the Cadillac while he walked to the front porch. He saw the kicked-in door, pulled out a .22 pistol, and went inside. John Brown shot him at point-blank range. Estelle heard the gunshots and ran screaming toward the road, but one of the cousins chased her into the yard and, as she crawled away begging for her life, shot her in the back of the head. After all of that, the killers escaped with only $250 from Stringbean's front pocket. They never found the much larger amount hidden in special pockets, sewn into his overalls, and in Estelle's brassiere, around $5,700 in all. Then, 23 years later, the story somehow became even sadder. In 1996, the cabin's new owner found about $20,000 in cash, hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace chimney. But by then, it had been destroyed by mice and rot. The next morning, Grandpa Jones arrived for a hunting trip he had already planned with Stringbean, and instead, he found the bodies. At trial, his testimony became important because he recognized one of the stolen firearms as a pistol he had personally given Stringbean. Both killers were sentenced to 198 years in prison. Marvin Brown died there in 2003. John Brown, in a decision many people never accepted, was paroled in November 2014 after serving 41 years, despite a campaign by Opry stars who fought to keep him locked up. What happened to Stringbean and Estelle did not just end two lives. It changed Nashville itself. Tour buses stopped visiting country stars' homes. Musicians who had once slept with their doors unlocked started putting in security systems. The old sense of trust was gone, and it did not come back. Grandpa Jones belonged to that older world, and that may be one reason people loved him so much. Born Louis Marshall Jones on October 20, 1913, he got the nickname Grandpa when he was only 22 because he was so grumpy during early morning radio shows. Instead of fighting the image, he leaned into it. He created the old man persona, learned clawhammer banjo from Cousin Emmy, and turned himself into one of the most dependable and familiar faces on Hee Haw. For more than 20 years, he was part of the fabric of the show, especially through his "Hey Grandpa, what's for supper?" routine and the beloved Hee Haw Gospel Quartet. His final days were sad and sudden. On January 3, 1998, just moments after his second Grand Ole Opry performance of the night, he suffered a severe stroke. He died a little over a month later on February 19th at age 84. Junior Samples was different again, and maybe the strangest thing about him was how little acting he had to do. Born Alvin Samples Jr. in 1926 in Cumming, Georgia, he came from a life that already sounded like an exaggerated country comedy sketch. He was a sixth-grade dropout. He had worked as a carpenter, a moonshiner, and a stock car driver. He spent his first 40 years in near-total obscurity, living in a three-room shack without running water. Then life took a bizarre turn. His young son once found a large fish head on the shore of Lake Lanier. Junior put it on his head like a hat and made up a wild story about catching a record-breaking bass. A publicist recorded the story. It became a novelty hit, and that odd little moment opened the door to Hee Haw through Archie Campbell. Once he got there, Junior became unforgettable, mostly because he was not pretending to be polished. His famous used car lot phone number, BR 549, became so famous that a 1990s country band later named themselves after it. He could barely read cue cards, and when he stumbled through lines, it was real. Even his famously mangled attempt to say the word trigonometry was genuine. And one detail says almost everything about him. At one point, he had his upper four front teeth pulled simply because somebody told him a comedian was funnier with missing teeth. That is the kind of logic that sounds made up, but with Junior Samples, it was not. He weighed close to 400 pounds at times, and his health failed early. His wife Grace died first, and only 4 months later, on November 13, 1983, Junior died of a heart attack at 57. His funeral was held in Cumming, a town of just 3,400 people, and it was the largest funeral the town had ever seen. Then, maybe more than anyone else connected to Hee Haw, Lulu Roman lived a life that felt like a full story of collapse and redemption all by itself. She was born Bertha Louise Habel on May 6, 1946, and from the beginning, life had been cruel to her. Born with a thyroid dysfunction in a home for unwed mothers in Pilot Point, Texas, she was placed in the Buckner Orphans Home in Dallas. Because of her weight condition, she was never adopted. Before Hee Haw, she performed in Dallas nightclubs owned by Jack Ruby, the same man who later shot Lee Harvey Oswald, and she was billed as Lulu Roman, the world's biggest go-go dancer. Even by show business standards, that was a hard beginning. Buck Owens recommended her to the producers of Hee Haw, and she became part of the very first episode. Soon, she turned into the show's most requested female cast member. But success did not fix the chaos in her life. Her drug use grew worse, and it included marijuana, LSD, amphetamines, and methamphetamine. In March 1971, she was arrested for possession on or near the Hee Haw set, and she was fired. That could have been the end of her story. Instead, it became the breakpoint. In 1973, Lulu experienced a Christian conversion that changed the direction of her life. When she returned to the show, she came back with one condition. Every episode had to include a gospel song. The producers agreed, and that decision created the Hee Haw Gospel Quartet, one of the most loved parts of the series. From there, her life slowly took on a different shape. She recorded more than a dozen albums, won a Dove Award, and in 2005 underwent lap band surgery that dramatically reduced her weight. Still, sorrow never fully left her either. Her son Justin died in October 2017. Then, after moving to Bellingham, Washington, to be near her surviving son Damon, Lulu Roman died unexpectedly on April 23, 2025, at age 78, just 7 months after the move. Hee Haw worked because it had stars people remembered, but the show would never have become what it was without the players around them, the ones who kept the whole thing alive week after week and gave the cornfield its strange little magic. One of the most important was Archie Campbell, born in 1914, who turned out to be much more than just a funny face on screen. He was one of the show's 2 original head writers, which meant he helped shape the voice of Hee Haw from the inside, while also becoming one of its most unforgettable performers. His spoonerism routines became legendary, especially Rinder Sella, the girl who slopped her dripper, and people remembered those bits because they sounded silly at first, and then got even funnier the more you listened. He also created the barbershop sketches, led gloom, despair, and agony on me, and teamed up with Gordy Tapp for the PFFT. You Was Gone duet. When he died of a heart attack in Knoxville in 1987, at the age of 72, he left behind more than memories, because the house where he grew up later became a museum. Then there was George Lindsey, born in 1928, who came into Hee Haw already famous for playing Goober on The Andy Griffith Show. He joined the cast in 1972 and stayed for 20 years, yet for all that success, he carried a private frustration that never really left him. He felt trapped by the role that made him famous, and in his autobiography, he admitted how deeply that shadow followed him. He wrote that even beyond Mayberry, Goober's shadow continued to completely dominate his life. That line says a lot, because it shows how fame can give a person everything on the outside, while taking something from them on the inside. He also wrote openly about his struggles with alcoholism. Around him, stories kept growing, and one of the strangest was the unconfirmed claim that Gene Roddenberry had once wanted him to play Spock on Star Trek. Whether that was true or not, it became part of the strange mythology around him. He died of heart failure in 2012 at 83, and the tribute from Andy Griffith hit hard because it was so simple and so human. He said they were not afraid to say, "I love you," and that those were the last words the two of them had shared. Sheb Wooley brought a completely different kind of energy. Born in 1921, he had range that almost feels unreal when you look back on it now. In 1958, his novelty song, "The Purple People Eater," sold 3 million copies, which already would have been enough to make most people memorable. But that was only one part of his story. He acted too, playing a gunman in High Noon and later co-starring on Rawhide with Clint Eastwood. Then there is the detail that makes his career feel almost mythical. He is widely credited as the voice behind the Wilhelm scream, that stock scream effect heard in more than 300 films, including every Star Wars movie. On Hee Haw, he also wrote the theme song, and through his comedy alter ego Ben Colder, he won the CMA Comedian of the Year award in 1968. Even near the end, he never really stopped. After fighting leukemia from 1996 onward, he recorded his final song just 4 days before his death in 2003 at age 82. In one last perfect detail that sounds almost written for a film, his funeral was held at High Noon because that was what he had asked for. The Hagar twins gave the show another kind of charm, because Jim and John were impossible to miss. Born on August 30th, 1941, they were identical twin guitarists discovered by Buck Owens while performing at Disneyland. That lucky break brought them in as original cast members, and they stayed from 1969 until 1986. Their story had little surprises, too. They went to the same high school as Harrison Ford and Hillary Clinton, and in 1973, they even appeared in Playgirl magazine, which only added to their odd pop culture footprint. But their ending became one of the saddest stories tied to the show. Jim died first, after collapsing from a heart attack in a Nashville coffeehouse parking lot on May 1st, 2008. He was 66. John was devastated, and the loss seemed to hollow him out. Just 8 months later, on January 9th, 2009, he was found dead in his bed. The story is often described as a textbook case of the twinless twin phenomenon. And once you know what happened, it becomes hard to think of one brother without immediately thinking of the other. Kenny Price added his own huge presence, and huge really is the word people always came back to. Born in 1931, he was nicknamed the Round Mound of Sound because of his nearly 300-pound frame and his booming bass voice. He replaced Tennessee Ernie Ford in the Gospel Quartet, and also played the overprotective father in the Farmer's Daughter sketches. He seemed built for broad comedy and big reactions, which made it all the more shocking when his life ended so early. He died of a heart attack in 1987 at just 56, making him one of the youngest regular cast members to die. The women of Hee Haw left their own mark too, and some of them are still here in 2026, which creates a strange bridge between the old television world and the present day. Misty Rowe, born in 1952, remains one of the most recognizable Hee Haw honeys, and at 73, she is still actively performing from her home in Bluffton, South Carolina. Her life moved in more directions than many people realize. She was the first actress to play Marilyn Monroe on film, appeared on Happy Days as a car hop, and starred in Mel Brooks's When Things Were Rotten. She has also kept the Hee Haw connection alive by touring with a Hee Haw Honey reunion stage show, which means she is not just remembered for that world, she is still carrying it forward. Barbie Benton took a very different path. Born Barbara Klein on January 28, 1950, she is 76 in 2026 and has been fully retired since 1986, living between Aspen and Los Angeles with her husband, George Grado. Before Hee Haw, she was already known to the public because of her relationship with Hugh Hefner, which lasted from 1969 to 1976, after the two met when she was just 18 on Playboy After Dark. Their story came with its own strange details, too. Hefner proposed to her 4 times, and 3 of those proposals happened after he had been caught cheating. But Benton was more than a celebrity girlfriend. She had real success in music, with Brass Buckles becoming a top 5 country hit in 1975, while Ain't That Just the Way reached #1 in Sweden, which is the kind of fact that sounds random until you realize how unpredictable entertainment careers can be. Gunilla Hutton brought another unforgettable presence to the show. Born Gunilla Wiklund on May 15, 1944, in Gothenburg, Sweden, she became famous on Hee Haw as Nurse Goodbody, the flirtatious nurse who played opposite Archie Campbell's Doc Campbell for more than 20 years. By 2026, she is 81, and she was still appearing at celebrity autograph conventions as recently as September 2025, which says something about the staying power of that character. Before Hee Haw, her life had already drifted into headlines because she had an affair with Nat King Cole when she was a 19-year-old chorus girl. It is one of those details that reminds you how much history can sit quietly behind a smiling television face. Kathy Baker may not have had the loudest role, but she became part of the rhythm of the show in a way viewers never forgot. Born on January 21, 1947, she is 79 in 2026 and lives in Orange, Virginia, where she handles title insurance transactions at her husband's law firm. On Hee Haw, she delivered the show's signature sign-off, "That's all," and because that line closed every episode, her face and voice became tied to the memory of the show itself. The way she got there makes the story even better. She had actually been working as a scenic painter at the Nashville studio, where Hee Haw was taped, and after 40 failed auditions, a director happened to notice her. That accident changed everything. Ronnie Stoneman carried a much rougher story beneath the laughs. Born on May 5, 1938, and known to audiences as the gap-toothed Ida Lee Nagger, she was also called the First Lady of the Banjo. She died on February 22, 2024, at the age of 85. Her roots ran deep into country music because she was the youngest of 23 children born to country music Hall of Famer Ernest "Pop" Stoneman. That alone sounds enormous, but her own life was even harder than people knew. In her 2007 autobiography, she described a life full of pain and survival. She had 5 abusive husbands, married at 16, became a single mother of 5 by her mid-20s, and described her childhood with the word "pooristic," saying it was way beyond poverty-stricken. Once you know that, her comedy starts to feel different because it came from someone who had seen far more than the audience could guess. Gailard Sartain also deserves a place in this story because he gave Hee Haw something people might not expect from it: real dramatic weight. Born in 1943, he played several characters on the show for nearly 20 years, then moved into a serious film career with roles in Mississippi Burning, Fried Green Tomatoes, and The Buddy Holly Story, where he played the Big Bopper. He died of natural causes at his home in Tulsa on June 19, 2025, at age 81. Even then, the final word on him somehow still carried the spirit that made him memorable. His wife of 36 years told The Hollywood Reporter, "Actually, he died of silliness. It was funny, sad, and perfect all at once." Charlie McCoy may not always be the first name casual viewers remember, but musically, he was one of the giants behind the whole thing. Born on March 28, 1941, he served as the show's music director and led the $1 Million Band. In 2026, he is 84 and still active, which feels fitting for someone who has spent his life at the center of so much music. He was inducted into the Grand Ole Opry as recently as July 2022, and his wider career is almost overwhelming when you start listing it. At his peak, he played on more than 400 recording sessions a year. He appeared on Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde on Blonde. on George Jones's He Stopped Loving Her Today, on Simon and Garfunkel's The Boxer, and on Elvis Presley soundtracks. By 2009, he had already been inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, but even that almost feels too small for a session career that touched so many classic records.